The story begins with our protagonist, Shen, who was an orphan and was adopted by Mr. Lin. Even though this man treated him well, his family wasn't very welcoming, and for some unexplained reason the old man married our hero to his granddaughter. They didn't like the boy, saying he was trash. While he was married to this girl, she ended up setting a plan against him. They said he had tried to take advantage of his own wife, and because of that, kicked him out of the house. And on top of that, they hired several thugs to beat him up. The guy didn't have an easy life at all, and it was on that day that his fate began to change, and he was face to face with the dragon. The boy didn't know if it was a dream, and the creature said that this pathetic boy was a descendant of the dragon. If by chance the dragon had another more worthy descendant, our protagonist would not have inherited his legacy. Basically, he was the only legitimate lamb of the dragon bloodline, and because of that, he ended up receiving the ancestral power, and before saying goodbye, his father told the boy not to disappoint him. Thus, he received the dragon's cultivation, a mysterious power, and even though he was complete trash, now he had a trump card to get his revenge. At that moment, he wakes up with women around him. A pretty girl with black hair told him not to move because the wounds were serious. Shen didn't know where he was, but he felt his body was different. The girl said the doctor would arrive soon while our protagonist thanked her. Humbly, he asked her name so that he could repay the kindness in the future. However, all of the boy's wounds were healed, and she found it amazing. A little worried, she said he didn't need to repay her, as she had simply done a good deed. What made her anxious was her grandfather's health. He had been suffering from a chronic illness for many years and was now at serious risk. Since Chen had awakened the power of the dragon, he said he could heal her grandfather. But of course the girl didn't believe that. The doctor had already arrived and said the man's fatigue was due to yang energy and that he would soon be fine. However, our boy arrives asking if that was true. From afar, the boy mentions that there is a dark energy in Mr. Su's head, and deep down, the girl tells our hero not to speak nonsense. The doctor, who was highly respected, called the boy ignorant. And then our hero asks if this doctor would take full responsibility if something happened to Mr. Su. The mood there gets a bit tense, and acting all arrogant, the doctor said he had never made a wrong diagnosis in his entire life. At that moment, the old man starts coughing, and his granddaughter becomes even more worried, asking the doctor if her grandfather hadn't improved like he said. This shameless doctor starts to panic while the girl asks for an ambulance. Knowing the situation was critical, our hero said there was no time, and placing his hands on the old man's head, he said the body was collapsing from energy overload. These ancient medicine matters didn't seem very real, but the girl wanted to cling to this one hope. She had asked him to heal her grandfather, and there was our hero using the dragon's energy. He didn't know if it would work, as he had just ignited his cultivation. The only thing he could do was trust in this new power. And after channeling the dragon's energy, the old man starts to breathe a little better. He feels his lungs fill with oxygen, and shortly after he gives a strong cough, even the doctor is surprised. Shen was tired from using so much energy, and the old man says he will remember the kindness of this boy and asks what he wants as a reward. He could very well choose the old man's granddaughter, but our hero was old-fashioned and liked to take it slow, so he said he didn't need anything. That made the girl give a slight smile. At this point, he had already won over the babe. Then she goes over and grabs his arm, saying it was very good that she saved him, and that these are the consequences of a good deed. Since they hadn't introduced themselves yet, she said her name is Susan, and remembered that his name was Shen. The guy is shocked, because she remembered his name even though he only said it once. Besides, he wanted to know how much time her grandfather had left to live. Lifespan was something irrelevant, because everyone calmly awaits their end. Our hero steps back saying his body is dirty, and he didn't want to soil the young lady's clothes. At that moment, he receives a message from his wife telling him to come home quickly. They almost killed our hero after hiring a gang to beat him up, and now they were asking him to come back home. He needed to deal with those matters first, so he told the girl and her grandfather that he would return later to continue the treatment. And meanwhile, the babe was already head over heels for our hero. She gives him a ride back home, and right after that, Mr. Su asks his staff to investigate the boy's family and background. Arriving at the Lin family home, our hero is already tense. His wife was yelling at him, and her name was Lin Xing. Think of an annoying character. I think this one is the most infuriating in all works. She was mad at the boy because he managed to survive, and even says she only married him because her grandfather forced her, and now she would file for divorce. That's because she had already found another man. Unlike Shen, this guy here named Yang Yi was the CEO of a millionaire company. In a pretty bold way, our protagonist said he didn't care about that. The only thing he wanted was to sign those divorce papers quickly, and the girl already got mad. After signing, He throws the paper in her face, saying he has nothing to do with the Lin family from now on. And the girl runs after him, asking who he thinks he is to talk to her like that. At that moment, a girl calls out to our hero. He feels a bit awkward and didn't know Susan would be there waiting for him. The girl was madly in love, but gave an excuse saying her grandfather needed him, and his ex-wife gets curious to know what Shen was doing with such a beautiful woman. In the afternoon, the employee explains that the boy was an orphan taken in by Mr. Lin. In other words, he had no noble descent and didn't practice cultivation. Because of that, Mr. Su was disappointed, thinking he had found someone very talented, and even comments that his illness was only slightly treated by pure luck, and maybe it would be better to call the doctor after all. Meanwhile, in the living room of the mansion, Miss Susan was a bit embarrassed. She said he could wait there, and if he needed anything, he could ask a staff member. Right after that, he closes the door, and he starts to get worried, afraid he won't be able to finish healing the old man. He hadn't been able to fully release the dragon's cultivation and had already taken on such a difficult challenge. So, he would need to train the spiritual art a bit more to help that family. After reading some books, he asks a maid to help him prepare a cauldron. Back in Mr. Su's room, the doctor was saying his health was still too weak to undergo treatments. Susan said they should trust Shen and that he could solve it. However, the old man wasn't believing it much, since the boy didn't have noble lineage. At that moment, he enters the old man's room with the object in hand, and it was a healing pill. It had a very bad smell, and the doctor kept saying it had to be a joke. They even start feeling sick because of the smell of the pill, and the boy explains it was made using medicinal herbs in a cauldron. Arrogantly, the doctor says the boy thinks he's some miracle healer. However, he had managed to gather various healing herbs with incredible power. It would be better for them to accept that than wait for the old man's health to worsen. After carefully analyzing it with a lens, the doctor concludes it was made using Chinese herbs, but that it couldn't heal the old man. Concluding that it was harmless, he decides to take the risk, even though the smell was awful. Everyone waits curiously, and then he ends up eating the pill. Within a few seconds, he feels his body relaxing, also feels all the vigor of youth, and even shouts that it was an amazing feeling. It felt like he had become young again, and the doctor can't believe it. The sensation was that all his vitality had returned. At that moment, the doctor is already pleased, asking how the boy did all that, and Shen replies that it was a secret. Right after that, the old man is even able to stand and thanks the boy. Since this old man was very rich, he ends up giving the whole village to the young man. Our hero doesn't accept, and the old man asks if by chance he was belittling his gift. And in just one day, our hero went from a broke nobody to the owner of a village. He told Susan that the woman with pink hair was his ex-wife, and speaking of the devil, she shows up asking what he was doing in that place. It's not possible that this brat is following him around, and putting his arm in front of the babe, he replies that he lives there. Since the poor boy didn't have any money, they start laughing in his face, saying he had gone crazy, and she ends up calling a fighter to beat Shen up, so he would learn not to lie. When that fighter named Jin Tiger sees Miss Susan, he is shocked. The woman asks what he's doing hanging out with such trashy people, and he kneels down begging for forgiveness. Right after, he walks over and slaps Xing in the face, telling her not to disrespect Susan. And instead of defending his girlfriend, that spoiled rich brat just asks why the fighter is so afraid of Susan. The muscle guy says that this rich brat is ignorant, because Miss Susan is a member of the Su family, one of the richest in the city. As soon as he arrives at his new house, he prepares a banquet for the babe, and she finds it delicious. This guy knows how to win a woman's heart, and she keeps complimenting him, saying that besides being handsome, he had many skills. And she even mentions that his wife was a fool for divorcing him, and our hero said they never lived as husband and wife. And she ends up blurting out loud, asking if there was still a chance to be with him. That ends up creating a very embarrassing scene, with both of them blushing. Right after that, they try to play it off and conclude that there is a chance to be with a woman like her. And so they start laughing out loud, saying that the situation was embarrassing. Even though he came from a poor background, he had great potential. In the late afternoon, when she gets in the car, the driver said she shouldn't get involved with that young man. He said that because she was from a rich family, and he was just an orphan, but that only upset Susan. She knew that this boy had great potential and would become one of the greats. After 3 days, his cultivation was already improving. He had read some books. However, the spiritual energy from this mountain was very low, and he couldn't make progress. To advance in cultivation formation, he would need to travel to a more suitable place. That wouldn't be enough for him to get stronger and protect the Su family. What he really wanted was to become stronger and impress Susan and marry her. You'll see that this protagonist here is not a pushover like the others. This guy here, besides making big investments, even slaps extras in the face. However, he thought it was impossible for him to marry a noble woman. Sooner or later, he would conquer the top of the city and be worthy of marrying Susan. At least that was his final goal. A group of people ends up arriving at his house saying they came to take revenge. Shen was all smug in front of women, but now that it was just men, they would teach him a lesson. In response, the big guy says that the entire village belongs to him, and that he honestly received it from Mr. Su, and if by chance they're jealous, they should sit and cry. In other words, if they decide to pick a fight with him, they will suffer the consequences. For a moment, they get scared, and that rich brat was hiding, scared stiff, and trying to act tough. He ends up telling his thugs to beat Shen up. That would be easier than taking candy from a baby. And after slapping the first fighter on the cheek, the guy was already seeing stars. The slap looked weak, but the guy flew to the other side of the village, and right after, that spoiled brat slaps the cigar head guy, saying he should go fight. To interrupt the battle, his phone rings and he says that Mr. Lin was hospitalized. And Susan hears this and gets worried, because this was the man who had taken him in. And that way, the spoiled brat goes away, leaving his thugs behind. Then he turns to those criminals and asks if by chance they have a car, because he would like a ride. The scene shifts to the hospital, with Mr. Lin hospitalized and his granddaughter worried. Handing over a wad of cash to the doctor, Yang said he wanted that old man to survive a few more days, until he married his granddaughter. At that moment, our protagonist arrives with Dr. San, the same doctor who was healing the babe's grandfather. The rookie said it was very good to receive help from Dr. San, and that spoiled brat, along with his fiancée, are angry because our protagonist is walking alongside the doctors to consult Lin. At the Su family mansion, Susan was worried about Shen, and her grandfather asks if she was thinking about the boy. Embarrassed, she said no, but it was very hard to hide things from her grandfather. And after sitting down, she asks if he would support her marrying this boy, since he didn't have noble lineage. It didn't matter who she married, as long as he was a good person and she loved him, that old man would turn him into someone powerful. The family business meeting was going to happen in 3 days, and there they would run a test to see if Shen was worthy of marrying her. And the girl gets happy because her grandfather approved it. Actually, she didn't care about riches or status, but if by chance he managed to pass the test, she would confess her love to him. Back in the operating room, the doctor says everything went fine, and he even keeps asking what the secret was behind that pill our hero had made. So our hero makes an excuse, saying he's nothing but a low-level dog. All of that so he wouldn't reveal the secret of the dragon's cultivation. But that doctor keeps saying he wants to become his disciple. At that moment, that bully jerk ends up showing up. With him, he brought the other thugs. And turning to the doctor, our hero says those guys are always being a pain. At that moment, Yang recognizes Jin and greets him. And the guy says it's a coincidence to meet in that place. Actually, he was greeting our hero, leaving the bully feeling awkward. This is the guy who slapped Shen's ex-wife and even said he would take him home as thanks. That leaves the bully not understanding anything. Besides that, they had prepared a banquet for Shen. They just wanted to flatter our protagonist. After refusing, the guy kneels and begs, even saying that Miss Susan wanted him to please our hero. And even Yang's thugs knelt, making the bully furious. That catches our protagonist by surprise. Then he asks where the address is, because he'll go there later. With tears in his eyes, the guy thanks him and hands over a special invitation. And afraid of the bully, his thugs end up running away, saying they won't follow him anymore. He was also going to attend that banquet, and with the phone in hand, he makes a call saying for the person on the other end not to disappoint at the banquet tonight. The time had come for that party that would take place at the Imperial Palace Hotel. People there were all elegant, while our protagonist was wearing an old t-shirt and ripped pants. The people start noticing the protagonist's clothes and begin mocking him, saying he was ruining the place's appearance, and the poor boy was just looking for someone familiar to chat with. His ex-wife thinks he came there to apologize to her, to beg for a second chance. Upon hearing those insults, angry Shen said she hadn't changed her arrogance over the years, and the only thing that had changed were the wrinkles on her face. That makes the woman furious, and she still says he's a worthless person. At that moment, someone shows up telling them not to fight. It was a college friend of Shen's named Yao. The sworn brother of our protagonist said he shouldn't attend fancy places like that, and besides, he didn't know his little brother had such a pretty friend. At that moment, he ends up taking a powerful punch to the face, and he jokes, saying something brushed against his hands. A bit worried, Yao says he picked a fight just to protect her, and that spoiled rich brat is crying, lying on the floor, while his ex-wife keeps yelling non-stop. The rich fighter shows up, and the brat asks for help, but he wasn't expecting this. That strong guy was a friend of our hero and was there to help him. Those arrogant snobs didn't expect that. and they go there to apologize for starting trouble with his friend. Because of that, they would have to suffer some punishment. Terrified, they start waiting for the worst. Lifting up a floor tile, the guy says they should eat in that spot. The woman thinks that's ridiculous, so she starts begging our hero for help, saying they're from the same family. In response, Shen says he no longer belongs to the Lin family and walks away. After sitting at a table, that fighter gives him a gift as a sign of friendship. Among the gifts, there was a credit card with $1 million. As for the other items, our hero comments that he won't use them, but that card will be very useful. The Su family was going to host a business meeting that most VIPs would attend, but he didn't get an invitation. He figures it's because of his attitude a few days ago, when he offended her. So he wants our protagonist to help him get an invitation. In return, he would give him the entire commercial district of the New Zone. Deep down, our protagonist, of course, is celebrating because he's making a lot of money from this. Later, he keeps thinking about that offer and runs into his rivals outside. His phone rings and it's his grandfather Lin. The old man wanted to talk to him about something important. As soon as he gets there, he realizes the old man was in bad shape. The man thanks our hero for coming to visit and apologizes for his grandsons treating the boy badly. Shen is the one who should be thankful, because the old man had taken him in and raised him. But the reason the boy was called there is because, actually, he wasn't an orphan. The old man says that 20 years ago, when the Lin family were fishermen, they found a man alone. This mysterious man was standing on the sea and facing 7 warships. After a fierce battle, the ships were destroyed, and that guy was like the god of war. His power was so great it became a mystery. That way, the man handed a baby to Mr. Lin and asked him to take care of him. That cute baby, in fact, was Shen Xing, our hero. And this man also said that once his wound healed, he would come back to retrieve the boy. And so, 20 years passed, and the old man cried because his grandsons treated the boy poorly. And it was thanks to that day that the Lin family began to prosper. Another day, he goes to Susan's grandfather's house to deliver more medicine. A man named Huang Long says he's impressed with the boy's cultivation abilities and asks what level he's at and which sect he belongs to. However, our boy was very humble, didn't belong to any sect, and his cultivation level was at the 2nd stage. And upon realizing the boy wasn't that powerful, the man starts provoking him, implying that the boy was using dark magic. But the babe defends her beloved, saying he managed to treat her grandfather's illness. In response, the master says even dark magic has its effects. Again, the guy implies that our protagonist uses miasma and poisonous insects. And while trying to insult our protagonist further, Shen says his breathing is heavy. Since the guy had bent knees, it was causing a lot of tension in his back and altering his breathing. That deeply offends the master, as if a mere rookie boy was trying to teach him something. About to turn Super Saiyan, the guy says he won't accept being insulted. Raising his hands in the air, wanting peace, the big guy says he doesn't want to hurt this man. But since he's determined to fight, the old man should suffer the consequences. After lowering himself and channeling draconic energy into his hands, he charges an attack. Seconds later, we see the master lying on the ground foaming at the mouth. I don't know where these guys get the idea of picking fights with random people. What if that guy is the protagonist of the story? So it's not wise to mess with anyone. Susan hugs our hero and gets worried, asking if his hand was hurting. And right after, she pinches the boy, saying she was worried about him. Laughing, he tells the girl not to worry, and she says that since she's going to spend the rest of her life with him, she wouldn't want him to get hurt. And he immediately asks, "What do you mean spend the rest of my life with you?" She gets red in the cheeks, deeply embarrassed. Then she turns her back and says he knew very well what she meant by that. The business event was happening in a few days, and the guy wanted to invite someone. Jinhu had asked to join the meeting, but if it would cause trouble, he wouldn't mind. She said it was fine, and even asked what kind of relationship he wanted to have with her. And the guy keeps joking, saying she's just a fling, and she already threatens to smack him. In a slightly more serious tone, Susan asks what he would do if someone tried to flirt with her. And in a pretty bold way, the guy says he'd never let anyone disrespect her. That's because he plans to spend the rest of his life with her and will protect her at all costs. I told you our protagonist is a real player, and if you want to see the two of them finally end up together, comment below, Shen the Bold. To ruin the mood, Grandpa shows up, leaving them both very embarrassed. The two were going to participate in an auction in another city to buy some items, but our hero only had those old clothes and needed better outfits, so they go to a mall to buy some stylish clothes. The prices were sky high, and that left the boy embarrassed. But the girl says he'll look very handsome in those shirts and asks him to try on a suit. The guy walks out of the dressing room all stylish, and she keeps saying he looks gorgeous. She even starts bringing him several clothes to try on. And since our hero is humble, he keeps saying she shouldn't spend so much money on him. It seemed like that bratty ex-wife of his was following him. And that bully who couldn't stop embarrassing himself asks if our hero is going to the auction. The babe was there to protect the boy and said the two were irrelevant and should know their place. The auction was happening in the afternoon in a luxurious venue. Bidding was going on for a valuable item, and bought for $1.5 million, Yang was about to take it home. At the last second, someone places a $5 million bid, and we see it's our dear Susan. People go wild because it was the highest bid of the night, and with that, she wins the auction and takes home a ring called the Love Gold. During a break, people start talking about those bids, and that hag shows up to confront her. She wanted that Love Gold ring because she was going to get married with it, and she even blames our protagonist, saying he's doing it just to mess with her. The woman starts throwing a fit, and her fiancé doesn't say a word because he knows Miss Susan is rich and influential. At that moment, the auction staff show up with the ring she just bought. After getting the legendary ring, she asks if Xing would like it, but before she could respond, the babe says they didn't deserve that ring, and even though she bought it, she wasn't interested either, and ends up throwing it into a lake outside, saying that if she wanted it, she could go find it. That was super offensive, and the hag keeps complaining to her fiancé. It was unthinkable for someone to pay $5 million for a ring and just toss it away, so the guy says he'll buy his beloved a necklace. After returning from the break, Shen says $5 million was a lot for a ring, and she laughs. She did that because those two were humiliating a friend of hers. And no matter what happens, she'll always be there to defend Shen, especially when it's something he can't fix himself. The guy falls even more in love, and at that moment, she comments that the necklace being presented was very beautiful, and when he looks, he realizes it's a luxury item worth a fortune. He starts imagining himself giving her that necklace as a gift, and even confessing his love. The bids start high, at $3.5 million. With the paddle in hand, he offers $5 million. That gets everyone's attention because it's such a huge number. It ends up catching everyone's eyes, and he knew his rival would jump into the fight. The guy offers $5.5 million, and our protagonist offers $6 million. The card he got from Jin Hu had a $10 million limit, so he needed to come up with a strategy. The bids start going up to $7 million, then to $8 million. That bully starts getting frustrated and sweating, while his fiancé tells him to give up. This wasn't just a competition over a necklace, but a war of pride. Trying to end the contest, Shen offers $20 million, and in the end, he manages to buy the item. To avoid too much attention, he grabs the babe's hand and runs out. Right after, they get in the car. The two start joking around, saying they managed to escape from those people who would bombard them with questions. And he even thanks the girl because she's making all this possible for him. With the necklace in hand, he asks if he can put it on her. Very embarrassed, she says yes, and he gets closer. Right after, she thanks him, saying she's really happy, even making our hero's heart beat faster. He gathers courage and asks if, in the future, when he has a high status, she would marry him. The girl was also bold, holds his hand, saying she doesn't care about status or background. She says that when you love someone, those things don't matter, and still believes his future will be bright. Yeah, folks, I told you this guy was bold, and just that move alone already deserves your like and your comment too. And meanwhile, his ex-wife was there by the little lake searching for the ring. The scene changes to late at night. Shen was practicing spiritual cultivation. He wanted to gather a bit more energy. Even reaching the third stage of mana refinement, it still wasn't enough. It was already late when someone called him saying there was a problem at the construction site. It was his friend Jin Hu, and they had also called a Taoist master, and they were in front of the building investigating. Several accidents were happening, and worst of all, it seemed to be staged by someone. Jin mentions that when accidents don't happen at the site, they happen at the workers' homes. After arriving at the location, Shen asks what is happening at the construction site, but just by feeling the energy of the place, he realizes something is strange. There was a cloudy mana accumulating in the place, and it would have to be removed. This leaves the big guy startled, and he asks how to resolve that. Probably something had been buried near the site and they would need to search. The Taoist master feels offended because our hero stepped over him with that information. The guy apologizes, saying he is still young and that he is not doubting the master. But even so, the old mustached man said he would follow the boy's advice and sweep the area. After a while, they end up digging in one spot. They were already 5 meters deep and still hadn't found anything. However, they should continue digging because our protagonist said there was something hidden there. The big guy didn't believe much, but still thought it best to keep digging. And after a while, they had found a box with dark energy. Upon opening, inside there was a dagger with a strange aura. This was clearly a cursed artifact, and the master asks the fighter if he had offended someone. Very frightened, the guy says he hadn't. However, something there might well be the cause of the accidents, as it was attracting many ghosts. With a scream, the guy asks what he should do. The old man says he has never dealt with this before and asks the boy's opinion. With the box in hand, he thinks what kind of solution he should take. And finally, he gets an idea. First, he should take it as far away as possible, so there aren't more problems. The mustached old man would like to ask which sect our protagonists belong to, as he would like to learn from them. As we know, he belongs to no sect, but obtained his powers by being a descendant of the dragon. Later, he takes the item to a forest. The right thing is to leave it as far away from other people as possible. And since that site belonged to the Su family, the boy begins to think there is a group wanting to bring them down. So he decides to investigate a bit more about this item. But when he uses his power, it shatters. The next morning, there was an opening ceremony organized by the Su family. Some members of other well-known families in the city were also invited, and among them was the Lin family along with those idiots. The ex-wife of our hero sees him in the distance and imagines he is crashing this party, and the guy thinks he's never going to get rid of that ugly hag. However, he ends up saying that out loud and makes the woman angry, so she begins causing a scene, asking the security guards to remove that man from there because he is an infiltrator. The one who ends up in trouble is precisely her, and the guards expel her from the Su family event since she was causing a ruckus. On stage, Miss Susan gives a welcome speech to the business gathering. She wanted to introduce an honorary guest, and everyone becomes curious. Who was there on the stage with her was our protagonist. They gossip about that, because they knew he didn't come from a noble lineage and was far from wealthy. A very important man in the city asks everyone's attention. He questions if Shen was aware of the responsibility of being beside the girl, and we know he's bold and always has words ready. His answer to everyone is that he is not good enough to be with Susan, but he will make sure to impress everyone. That answer was excellent, and everyone began praising him, saying he was handsome and smart. They go down the stairs, and he holds her hand like a gentleman and asks if he spoke well. The mustached man was called Quan and was responsible for that new building project. That already caught our hero's attention, and when he looks down, he notices his bracelet was cursed and comments that the man should remove that item. The accidents that were happening at that construction site were because of a cursed item, and it emanated the same energy as that bracelet. In response, the man says he got this item from his son, who bought it in a temple. Our protagonist asks if it was from an evil temple, leaving the man irritated. That was taken as an insult, and he called his security guards to beat the boy, and even apologizes to Elder Su, saying he needs to teach the boy a lesson. An old man asks his granddaughter if she won't help her beloved. However, she trusts him, and mentions that it's a great chance for him to prove his worth. She trusted 100% in our hero. I tell you guys, if you find one like her, it's to marry. The guy was twice Shen's size, but still couldn't land the blow. And with just one punch, the big guy flew away. He almost killed the guy, who even started complaining, asking if he could use the secret technique, and the boss said yes. Thus, he prepares himself and releases a sinister cultivation force. That's enough to make our hero worried. Certainly those guys do that to impress the opponent, but Shen says he's ready. The guy gets uneasy because he couldn't even make our hero flinch, and after charging forward, he disappears using a technique. And right after, he reappears behind to hit his back. In a fraction of a second, Shen dodges and counterattacks using a dragon punch. The strike was powerful and both were thrown back. However, the fight wasn't over, and the guy lunges to land another blow. The attack slams hard into the ground, causing an explosion. It was supposed to be just a business meeting, but it was becoming a dangerous battle. And with a smile on his face, he said that boy was nothing. And during the laugh, a hand emerges through the smoke, and after grabbing his arm, he starts to get worried. Who did you say was nothing? I bet at this point the guy needed to change his underwear. And using the dragon's energy, he saw the enemy's weak points, and even humiliated him by twisting his arms, trapping him. This is one of the most humiliating techniques there is. And to finish it off, he hit him with a team rocket punch, and made the guy fly again. The dude hit the ground hard, and to humiliate even more, he walked over and asked if the guy wanted a second round. Shen literally laid it on the table and asked to measure. Smashed on the ground, the redhead said he admits defeat. He had already said he was going to impress everyone, and the mustached old man went there to say that even so, he doesn't believe the bracelet is cursed. And he even proposes a bet. The kid just wanted to save this old man, and he was being annoying. He proposed that if in 3 days nothing bad happened to him, the boy should apologize on his knees in front of everyone. And if by chance Shen was right, the mustached old man himself would kneel and ask forgiveness. In the background, someone was watching the whole conversation, and they're wondering if they should leave the boy alone. Since he was on the 3rd level of refinement, they should let someone else deal with him. A bit later that night, they were outside having fun. That adopted sister of his who had taken a beating shows up with a gift. It was from Mr. Lin, who had left it for him. The old man couldn't attend because of his health, and so the boy accepts the gift and tells her she can go home. She had already completely changed her attitude and now was apologizing for bothering him. How satisfying it is to see our protagonist putting these freeloaders in their place. I like stories like this, where the guy gets revenge one by one for all the humiliation he suffered, and you'll see he's going to do that a lot more. The pretty girl asks what that box was, and he explains it's from Mr. Lin. Upon opening it, he sees there were some items, and also a letter titled for his dear son. The old man was like a father to him, and that's why he was worried about the content written there. Holding his hand, she said he should go somewhere more private to read the contents of the letter. That would be important, because it was too noisy there. With that, he goes to a special room, and before leaving, the girl says he can take as much time as he needs. He opens the envelope, and the content said that his mother was living in Kyoto, and her name was Jo Shen, but he should only go after her once he had unlocked absolute power. That makes the boy thoughtful. The world was much more complex than he thought. Later, he returns to the hall, and Susan notices that he had come back. A bit curious, she asks how it was. However, the guy didn't respond at all. At that moment, someone appears in a panic. He says that Mr. Kwan's wife was not well at all, and something had happened to her. Elder Lin asks what had happened, and the guy explains that she grabbed a kitchen knife and started cutting all the employees. Desperately, he asks for help from the people, but no one wanted to go. Finally, Shen volunteers to go there, already imagining that it might be due to that cursed bracelet. His beloved gets worried, because he wasn't very well regarded by that family, so she wishes he takes care. And the guy smiles and says he will take care. At night, he ends up arriving at that family's mansion. The place is very fancy, but it was completely destroyed. That fighter says that his boss's wife was acting strangely, but he refused to believe it was the bracelet. Our hero shows up to help, and the old man complains, saying he didn't call him. That object on his wrist was emanating a sinister energy and was the first suspect for causing that. Shen insists that he throw the bracelet away before it's too late. Then the old man's son appears, saying he bought that object at Buddha's temple. That was far from true, and our hero asks if he was lying. The guy gets mad at the accusations, and in response, our man says he'll leave, and if they ask for his help later, they'll have to kneel. And the old man tells him to leave then, that he won't be needed. At that moment, the Taoist master they had hired arrives on site, and when the old man sees that Shen was there, he gets surprised, and even asks if the situation was bad, and if the woman was possessed, but our hero said he hadn't seen her yet. In response, the old man said he would try to handle it, but the woman had a creature inside her, and even broke the chain, and charged at the Taoist master. Her energy was sinister, and he started screaming. His suspicions were correct, and it was something he couldn't handle with his skills. The mustached old man gets angry, saying he paid a lot of money for this master to be there. In response, the old master says the only one who could handle that problem was the boy in the white suit. So he asks our hero to solve the matter. But first, he should kneel in front of everyone and apologize. Obviously, the old man didn't want to do that, and instead offers $50 million instead of kneeling. That was very tempting, and could be used for investments. But in return, he wanted those herbs stored in the various safes behind them. He says this to the old man, because accepting the money felt wrong. If it were me, I would have asked him to pay 100 million. Quite pleased, the old man said he could take as many herbs as he wanted, and so they closed the deal. But before anything, he should hand over that bracelet. The old man wasn't willing, so our hero starts yelling for him to hand it over now. The energy emanating from that item was dark, so he uses his dragon cultivation to break the curse, and the woman slowly starts returning to normal, and even collapses on the floor. This could only be done because he could see the dark energy. Right after, he asks where the mustached man's son was. The brat was terrified, not wanting to admit where he bought that bracelet, and to avoid responsibility, he starts running. However, the bodyguard catches the spoiled brat. His recklessness had put his family in danger. The scene shifts to Mountain Village. Miss Susan took the brat there to investigate what he had to do with those cursed items. The redhead guy decided he would follow our hero, so he hired him as a bodyguard. They had roughed the kid up, as they were suspecting him of trying to harm the Su family. The guy explains he went to a temple to offer incense, and met a vendor there. Everyone knew they shouldn't buy things from strangers at Buddhist temples, but he ended up being naive and bought the item, not imagining the man was a scammer. The man said the item would bring luck, and so he bought that bracelet, thinking it would bring great prosperity. After much pressing, the kid finally admitted that the vendor was from the Xuanming cultivation sect. However, these people practiced unorthodox cultivation. In other words, guys, they cultivated dark magic. And our hero keeps saying he's an idiot for trusting them. Looking at the ground, the guy says he didn't know that, and never expected to endanger his family. He never imagined things would end like this, and if he could, he would have done it differently. And at that moment, our hero realized he was just an innocent and foolish kid. Right away, he asks the redhead to take that boy back home. It seemed this boy wasn't the one who buried the item at the construction site, so it could be that Xuanming sect. Since the Su family was very influential, they had many enemies. So he would start investigating first through this sect that practiced unorthodox cultivation. Various companies had connections with the local government, and it was no different with the Xuanming sect, and to find out, he'd have to defeat them first. However, the boy was still weak and would need a lot of training, and since he got those special herbs from the mustached old man, he could make strengthening pills. That's exactly what he did, but he ate so much that he got sick and woke up the next day with a stomachache. That was the price to reach level 6. His new employee said the Su family had invited him for lunch. The guy asks where he had slept, and the man says he spent the night in the yard. He was used to being humiliated by the other family, so our hero said he should choose one of the rooms in the mansion and move in. The man got all happy and thanked him, as he had never been treated well. Later, he hitches a ride to the Su family mansion. Upon arriving, one of the maids welcomes him, and he gets a bit worried. As soon as the door opens, he ends up face to face with Susan and a relative of hers who was full of himself. Just by looking at his face, it was obvious this guy was an idiot, and he was mentioning Shen's abilities. He also wanted to save Elder Su, so he bought a snow lotus. This item would be given to the elder of the family so he could recover his vitality. And looking at that rare item, our protagonist says it looked more like a rotten old radish. However, he had brought something better and ends up showing a pill. It looked more like an olive, but he said it would promote perpetual vitality to the elder. The guy starts mocking, saying it looked like a kid's candy, and so the two start arguing over who would help the elder. He ends up grabbing Susan's arm, and says that someone like Shen wasn't fit to marry her, but he was. It seems like this guy is a distant relative, like a fourth cousin or something like that. In response, our furious hero says that useless people like him only care about money and don't recognize true love, and even slaps the guy's hand, and says that the next time he touches his girl, he'll lose his fingers. This makes the little redhead furious, and he tries to charge at our hero with a punch. The chest of our hero was hard as stone, and when he lands the punch, he screams in pain, and the bones in his arm end up breaking. He screams like a little girl, and trying to cover it up, he says he'll come back later to settle things. That way, he gains one more problem to solve, and the old man shows concern, because that guy was one of the most influential businessmen in the city and had government contracts. In response, our hero says to forget it and tells Susan he has something important to say. He had found a cursed machete at her family's construction site, and Quan had a bracelet with dark energy. In other words, there was some organization or sect trying to sabotage the Su family. The grandfather and granddaughter look at each other, and right after, they start laughing. The young man doesn't understand what's happening. No other family in this city would mess with the Su family, and they already knew who was behind all this. Besides, the boy didn't have the skill to deal with those people, so it was better to let it go. However, our protagonist didn't want his girl in danger and said he wanted to protect her. But the elder said the time hadn't come yet, and that leaves him even more confused. Right after, she asks if he knows Yongdu, and he sees a temple reflected in that teacup. That name sounded familiar, but he didn't know who it was. Then the girl explains that the Su family, a few years ago, was one of the top families in Yongdu. Due to some changes, both she and her grandfather were excluded from the place, and 2 years later they arrived in the city of Bingcheng and had to build everything from scratch. However, she was greatly humiliated before all that happened, but they were lucky to escape alive. Even not knowing what had happened, our hero swears to avenge all the humiliation she suffered. She also wanted that, but it was hard to take revenge on them. She would never forget all the humiliation she went through, and promises that one day she will make them feel everything she did. However, she realizes that might scare the boy, so she starts to cover it up, saying that there's a long road ahead and they can't confront them head-on. Raising 3 fingers in the air, our hero says that in 3 years, he'll be at the top of Jingdu. He promises that wherever they go, people will have to bow in respect. However, the girl had a test for him, and asks if he'd be capable of handling the Dai family's issues alone. With great confidence, he says, "Leave it to me." The scene shifts to the Dai family mansion. The old man was listening to the story from his son, who had just fought with our hero. Then the elder of that family gets furious, asking if the boy named Shen really attacked him. That was an offense, since fighting among families was considered a declaration of war. Putting on his coat, he was getting ready to teach our hero a lesson, and even says this is a great opportunity to extort money from the Su family. The car stops in front of a house, and the old man goes all mad, wanting to speak to the Su family elder. After arriving in the entrance hall, he starts yelling, asking why no one came to receive him. Who shows up is our hero, asking if by chance he's Chowdi's father. And he asks this with a mafia-like pose, just to show respect. Easy there, Shunxing, not the face, so you don't mess up the funeral. The old man gets angry and asks if he was the one who hit his son. Once again, our protagonist humiliates the old man, saying the father hadn't raised the son right, so life would teach him. He even sighs, knowing he's messing with dangerous people. The old man gets angry, asking who this boy thinks he is to teach something to a member of the Dai family. Holding a magical orb, he shows that same temple and says his family has controlled the city for centuries. That makes our protagonist worried, and the old man keeps threatening, saying the boy must kneel and apologize. Then, calmly, he gets up and asks what will happen if he doesn't. The old man says he'll make him and Susan spend the rest of their lives in a wheelchair. Oh boy, you messed with the wrong guy. For mentioning Susan, our protagonist channels energy into his fingertips and then fires it at the old man's head, piercing his forehead. That already makes him furious, asking what the hell the boy did. In response, he said he'll suffer the consequences for messing with the Su family. That was strange, because he wasn't feeling any pain. And afraid of the consequences, the old man says he's leaving, but still keeps threatening. And to mock him, our hero waves goodbye. Finally, they had left, and Susan shows up with her grandfather, asking if the situation was resolved. The curse that had been used on that old man would affect his health and cause major mental damage. Besides, there's no need to apologize, because he'll return in 3 days asking for forgiveness. For now, he wants to go to the Ching Chung market to buy some medicinal herbs. He needed to be prepared, in case that old man had a plan B and tried to get revenge. With that, he ends up calling his employee. They were going to another city to buy herbs, and the redhead asks why they aren't going by car. And our hero gives that little speech saying public transport is good for the environment and blah blah blah, and the poor guy just agrees. And so, they get ready to board the bus, and as soon as they get inside, they realize it was very uncomfortable. Besides being smelly, it was cramped. What's more, the bus was falling apart. A few hours later, they arrive at the bus station. The experience had been horrible, and they both agree they need a car. And at that moment, someone calls for our hero, and he realizes it was his college classmate. She mentions it's a coincidence to find him there. The poor girl had been fired from her current job, and because of that, was on the street at this hour. That makes Shen worried, and he even says that her boss was very stupid for firing the girl. However, that was a long story. After the incident that happened at the start of the construction, the guy started picking on her, and soon after fired her. That makes our hero get irritated and say he will go there to teach him a lesson. But the girl said she didn't want to continue at that job, and it was good she left, and now she would work with her sister. They ask if she's telling the truth or just trying to protect that shameless guy. At that moment, the girl's sister appears. She sees our protagonist wearing a cheap shirt and starts noticing his shoes and pants. Then the girl explains that this was Shen Xing, her college classmate, and also reveals he is very kind and helped her. This woman mentions she heard about someone with the same name in the city of Bingcheng who was gaining a lot of fame, but it shouldn't be him. This woman is one of those typical stuck-ups who get their face broken, and her boyfriend looked like a mannequin. She said she would give our hero and his friend a ride, and told them to get in the car quickly, while her boyfriend apologizes, saying she's rude like that. Later, she takes them to a restaurant and says they can choose any food they want. That could be considered a gift, and our hero thanks her a bit embarrassed. She seemed very rude, but still had a good heart, just like Yao. Turning to her sister, she said she would like her help to sign a contract in the afternoon with President Li Doqing. That president was famous for being ruthless, and Yao was afraid of him. But that business branch had more ruthless people than cockroaches in a dump, and they would have to learn to deal with them. The girl's boyfriend says it's not proper for her to go alone, and that makes the woman angry. And even our hero comments that it's good to take someone else along, and he even suggests going himself and also his assistant, Scarface. It didn't seem like a bad idea, and the girl ends up approving, saying she'll give them a code to enter. That way, everyone goes to the company building. That was the president of the association who worked for the Li family. To sign the contract, he wanted Yao to answer how old she was. A bit shy, she said she was 25 years old. In a shameless way, he tells the girl to sit on his lap, because then he would sign the contract. The girl's sister steps in and says that's not appropriate, and that bald fat man says these newbies don't know how to do business, and he starts pulling the poor girl's arm, saying that's the only way he'll sign. The Li family's company was very big, and because of that, they thought they could do whatever they wanted to others. At that moment, the girl realizes this executive was really dangerous, and decides to call our hero. Downstairs, He receives the message and knows he needs to go there to help. At that moment, he opens the door, asking if President Lee missed him. The chubby guy was still hugging the girl and asks who the hell this young man is. Upon greeting, he extends his hand and ends up squeezing it very hard, making the executive scream in pain. Mocking him, he asks if the chubby guy was so happy to see him again. Right after, he lets go of the guy's hand and asks if he will sign the contract soon and if he had learned from his mistake. After getting what they wanted, they ask Shen if the chubby guy wouldn't want revenge, and we see he's sending a message to President Dai saying Shen was in the building. However, the head of the Dai family was suffering from that curse our hero had placed on his forehead. Several doctors were called, but none could identify the cause of those headaches. Then, his son realizes it might be the spell Shen put on him, and rushes to his father asking if they should hire that boy. His face was itching a lot, and his head seemed like it was going to explode. It was unthinkable that someone had such great power to cast a spell like that. With no other options, the old man decides they need to go to the Su family's house to ask for forgiveness. Upon arrival, they knock hard on the door, and after entering, the old man immediately kneels begging to be saved. His grandfather laughs, saying he doesn't have the power to do that. The only one who could save him was Shen, but that guy was reaping what he sowed. If he wanted Shen's help, he should go to him and beg for forgiveness. That way, the guy starts crying, asking to say right away where the boy was. His neck wouldn't stop itching, and after receiving the address on his phone, he told his employees to take him there immediately. Meanwhile, our protagonist was finishing the business deal. The chubby guy had sent a message saying Shen was in the building, and while his boss hadn't arrived, he would keep stalling our hero with flattery. He soon notices the bald man trying to please him, so he snaps his fingers, and his employees arrive with lots of food, and it couldn't miss the luxury drinks, and even a banana candy, treating him like a true king. Obviously, this makes our young man a bit uneasy, and they even offer some to the girls. There were only a few minutes left for President Dai to arrive at the company, and so he would have to stall a little more, because as soon as the boss arrived, he would deal with that Shen. Someone ends up knocking on the door. Everyone is surprised, wondering who it could be, and the bald fat man already knows it's the president, so he starts to belittle our hero. The guy was confident, imagining the boss was there to protect him and punish the arrogant boy. He even says that President Dai had appointed him as head of this company, and he wouldn't be belittled by arrogant youths. The two girls start to get worried, as they could suffer the consequences. At that moment, someone kicks open the door, and the chubby guy begins gossiping everything our hero had done. In fact, the gentleman was there to ask for forgiveness, and had even brought a gift. In an angry way, President Dai asks what the chubby guy was doing. Quickly, he changes posture and kneels asking for forgiveness, because even his boss respected the boy. To be forgiven, he first needed to sign the contract and improve the clauses. Besides, he wouldn't accept extra conditions, so the contract had to be redone from scratch. After raising two fingers, our hero removes that spell, saying the old man had already learned his lesson. However, he wouldn't forgive a second time. With that, the magic disappears, and his body was as good as new, feeling great. The guy even hands over more gifts and asks for forgiveness, and immediately after says he will leave so as not to bother the boy. That was the last chance he would give that old man. And the girl is surprised, as she thought he wasn't the real Shenxiang. Everything had gone well thanks to him, and the girl didn't even know how to thank him. Since Yao had helped him a lot, this was a way to return the favor, doing a favor for her sister. And the girl said not to hit on her younger sister, and in response, the young man said he already had a girlfriend, leaving the girl jealous deep down. Now that they were free, she would give him a ride. Our protagonist's intention was to visit the Qingcheng herb auction, and so they go there, and the girl's boyfriend says the herbs there are the best. Besides, a sacred herb that few people knew about would be auctioned. Our hero already knew all this because he had studied medicinal herbs in college. That was true, but much of his knowledge came with the rise of the dragon lineage. The redhead's girlfriend didn't believe in traditional Chinese medicine. However, he also found those medicinal herbs interesting. Upon arriving at the auction, our hero was amazed. At that moment, a big commotion was happening at the building's door. It was a famous actress there, but the protagonist didn't know her. That made the redhead nervous, asking what world he lived in. But our hero wasn't superficial enough to follow celebrities. This woman was a famous actress, and her grandfather was suffering from a serious illness. That's why they came to buy sacred medicinal herbs, hoping to cure the old man. Upon hugging our hero, his colleague said today would be his unlucky day, because whenever that famous actress attends auctions, she ends up buying all the herbs. Basically, he was going to leave there empty-handed. The place was crowded, and the actress ended up sitting in the front rows. The first item to be auctioned was a snow root from the western region. The starting bid was $2 million, and the redhead asks if our hero wouldn't buy it. However, the boy said that item was useless. The actress seemed to understand the subject and stayed quiet without bidding. Right after, that item was sold, and the second treasure would start at a 10 million bid. People in the audience said the item seemed worthless, and that it was ridiculous to start with such a high bid. That herb was a sacred root, but ordinary people didn't know its value. Our hero even hoped no one would bid because he wanted to buy it. So he raised the paddle, making an offer. 20 million was offered by the actress, and that made the boy irritated. Raising the paddle, he offered 30 million, and a bidding war was about to start. With the woman offering 50 million, the protagonist offers a little more, about 80 million, and people call him crazy. That medicinal herb was necessary to cure his grandfather, so she offered $100 million. Even the guy didn't believe that a simple plant root would be worth all that money, but that was the maximum amount the protagonist could offer. At that moment, the girl's grandfather fainted, falling to the ground. Desperate, she asks the security guards to get a doctor because her grandfather was very ill. She would need that herb as soon as possible, so she hands a card to the auction presenter, telling him to deliver the herb quickly. However, that wasn't right, and the boy runs over there. If they used that herb on the old man at this stage, he could die. That was suspicious, so the woman thought it was a charlatan trying to steal her herb. When the traditional medicine doctor arrived, our hero explained the situation to him and said that if a plant root was watered, it would only speed up the disease. That made sense because he also studied this training method, and he ends up taking that medicinal plant from the actress's hands. What the boy said was right. If that herb was used at that moment, her grandfather would have no chance to survive. Therefore, what she needed to do was trust the young man. With no other options, she agrees, and says that if he manages to save her grandfather, he could ask for anything as a reward. What he would like was that Ganoderma root because it would be useful to him. In response, the girl agrees, saying she would only deliver it if he saved her grandfather. A large crowd of people starts gathering around. His colleague asks if he would be able to do that. And anyway, it wouldn't be the first person he saved from a similar situation. All he needed was to focus on the mountains and lakes. Imagine the resurrection of spring. And finally, gather the essence of heaven and earth all in one place. This was necessary for the infinite and immortal flow of life. After performing these enchantments, the ancestral dragon appeared, which the boy desired. A few days ago, they signed a contract, and so the dragon had to obey his requests. All he wanted was for the dragon to gather all life in the palm of his hand. With few options to refuse, the Shelong agreed, laughing. The creature was only doing this because the boy was the son of Qing Yun, and thus the core of the Mercury sun aligned. The energy of earth and sky was circulating around him. This caused a gust of wind inside the auction, frightening everyone. The old man in the wheelchair slowly began to regain consciousness, and then the essence of life returned to his forehead. Thus, the cultivation treatment was completed. The girl hugged her grandfather, thanking him for still being alive, and people were moved. According to the deal, he should keep that Ganoderma root. As a thank you, the girl wanted to invite him to a formal dinner, but the young man said he already had plans and declined, but thanked for the invitation. So they arranged to meet on another occasion, and the redhead asked why the boy refused the chance to dine with a celebrity. The old man's treatment was not over yet, and he would need to return every 2 months to take medicine prepared on site. The girl asked how much that medicine would cost. With a sly look, he said it would cost $20,000 per pill. This made the girl angry, asking if he was a scammer. In response, he said the girl was not obliged to buy, and he said goodbye, hoping to see her soon. His goal in this city had been achieved, which was to get that Ganoderma root. With it, a cultivation essence would be made to improve his power. A moment later, they returned home, and he told Susan he had brought gifts. There was a family talking with them, and it was revealed to be Mr. Dai with another warrior. The old man said goodbye with a not very friendly face. Crossing paths with the purple-haired boy, he felt threatened. The guy came with his hand trying to hit him, but the boy managed to block. The colored-haired kid tried again to land a series of blows, but all were blocked. Then, shamelessly, he tried to escape running. And if there was one thing our protagonist was good at, it was humiliating bully extras. He grabbed the guy's arm firmly, telling him to be careful not to fall down the stairs. Later, he met with Susan's grandfather to talk about his health. He was fine and wanted to spend the rest of his life in a small town. After much thought, he decided to move to Shangcheng. He had lived a lot and now wanted to rest with old friends and would leave his affairs in the hands of our hero. Our shameless protagonist, blushing, asked if Cremosa was going to live with him, and the girl said she would sleep upstairs and he could stay downstairs. Already in the car, the boy's arm was all hurt, and he commented that Shen was stronger than they thought. Mr. Dai wanted to know if he could defeat that enemy, and if his suspicion was right, Shen was actually a sorcerer. The old man got angry, saying he had paid a high price for him to eliminate Shen, but that didn't mean he couldn't defeat the enemy, because sorcerers had weaknesses. Since Master Su was moving to the countryside, it was a great chance to eliminate Shen, and they ended up agreeing, deciding the exact time. The next morning early, the old man was saying goodbye to the villagers. He would spend the rest of his life with his old friends in the countryside, and people began to cry because he was a good elder. And as he left, the people were in tears. Now the official leader of the village would be our protagonist, and they should be careful because the local people were greedy and would try to cheat him. So the boy already decided to make it very clear to everyone. The family head was still Master Su, but the owner of this village was him, and therefore, people should respect him. The villagers were annoyed by this, calling our hero ungrateful, and Susan was feeling bad, short of breath. Actually, she was worried because now her grandpa would be far from her, and they would need to be strong to prevent a rebellion. Besides, friends and relatives are actually the first to want to organize a betrayal. The scene changes to the Lee family house. His ex-wife was lying on the sofa, scrolling her phone, and she received the news that the Su family elder was moving to the countryside. This made her very happy, and she hugged her husband, saying it was a great business opportunity for them. But it wasn't just about business. Now that the family head was no longer there, they could defeat our hero, and it would be the perfect chance to hire a warrior. The door ends up opening, and the woman quickly gets up, asking who dares to enter her house. Who was there was a group of mysterious men wearing hoods. From their hands came a poisonous insect, while the man recited magical words. The two ended up falling to the ground, and desperately begged for them to leave. They had very mysterious objectives. The scene changes to our hero's village. They were returning home, and the guy was very polite and even opened the door for Cremosa. At that moment, he hears a scream inside his house, and realizes the noise was coming towards him. Scarface was desperate. He said a man wearing white clothes entered the house and he couldn't stop him. Shen already knew it was that purple-haired guy. And he told Scarface to stay outside, protecting Susan. Worried, she asks what was happening, and he explains that the young man in the white suit who visited her house with Mr. Dai came to handle some business matters. This makes the girl worried, thinking it was someone trying to eliminate them. That was exactly it, but he made an excuse, saying he forgot he had that appointment, all to avoid worrying his companion. As soon as he enters the house, he apologizes to the man for being late. And very fake, the guy says he should apologize, since he entered without permission. While Susanna goes upstairs, our hero tells him to take the man somewhere else to settle the matter. Very fake, the guy asks for a glass of water. And opening the fridge, the protagonist asks if he prefers juice or tea. This was the perfect chance to finish the guy, so he moves to strike, intending to quickly end the job. He was about to hit our protagonist from behind, but the boy crouches down to grab a drink, and asks if it was Scarface who bought that can. Even though he tried to hit our hero, now he was pretending. With the coffee can in one hand and the tea in the other, he asks which the guy prefers. The K-pop guy says he would like tea. Laughing friendly, Shen says he'll heat the water. While preparing the drink, it was the perfect chance for the guy to try another attack, and he even prepares his hand, saying now he won't miss. It could only be luck that the boy escaped last time, so he didn't escape this time. At that exact moment, the boy ducks. The villain hits his hand on the wall and the hero asks what he's doing, and mocks him, asking how he managed to trip on a flat surface. The guy makes a lame excuse, saying his slipper slipped. It couldn't be a coincidence, as he dodged twice in a row, and now, with a blade in hand, it would be impossible to dodge. Holding a cup, our protagonist was serving him, but he gets up from the chair, saying he should bring some cookies, and the guy misses the strike. He hit his hand on the wall, and now his face on the table. To humiliate him even more, the protagonist asks if he needs help. It was obvious the boy did that on purpose. After handing him the tea, our protagonist says this drink can cure illnesses and would be useful to heal his wounds. Pretending to be clueless, Shen asks what the guy came to do there, and the man says he was already leaving. After suffering 3 humiliations in a row, he didn't want to suffer the door, but in response, Shen says he already gave him 3 chances to eliminate him and therefore wouldn't let him leave alive. The guy starts to get scared and says he's just a level 3 warrior, and since our protagonist was a sorcerer, in close combat warriors had the advantage. Hearing this, the boy laughs, and appearing behind the enemy, he asks who the hell said he was a sorcerer, and hits a blow on a guy, who manages to block with his arms. However, the strike was extremely powerful, and unexpectedly he was thrown far away, even breaking the kitchen floor. Shen had given him 4 chances, and he didn't take any, and he asks if the Dai family had hired him. The guy nods, sweating cold. After leaving there, he'd just stop by the bathroom and change his underwear. Patiently, the hero says he won't eliminate him. Moreover, he'd give the Dai family one more chance, since they didn't take the previous one, but the third time, he won't forgive. That was the message the guy should deliver. At that moment, Susanna appears, asking if they finished the meeting. The guy runs away scared, and the girl says that man was strange. The scene changes back to the Dai family house. The old man had received a call. It was the warrior saying he couldn't eliminate Shen, as the boy was stronger than he imagined. This made the old man furious, saying he paid a lot of money. But the boy advises the old man not to mess more with that family, or they'd get hurt. That made the old man throw the phone away. This one didn't know how to take chances to keep quiet, and instead of calming down, he decided to hire new people. Those hooded guys appeared at the place, and the old man got a big scare. If the Dai family wanted revenge, he would be there to help. If you got to this part of the video, leave a like and hype. Just swipe to the side there in the comments on your phone and hit the hype button. It really helps the channel and costs you nothing. Done that, let's go back to the video. That rich fighter comments that the construction workers were slacking off. At that moment, he receives a call. It was Yang asking if Jinhu was interested in buying an item. And the guy gets all excited, saying he always wanted to buy that artifact. But the husband of our hero's ex-wife was being controlled to make this call, setting a trap. And the poor friend of our hero believed in that power. After hanging up, the guy informs the masked man that the plan is working, and in a pathetic way, he asks to be freed. If the masked man wanted, he would give up his wife and sister-in-law, and moreover, all his money. All he wanted most was to stay alive. But at that moment, the hooded man ends up hitting that shameless guy. The girls cry in fear watching that scene, and as he crouches, the man asks what he should do with those girls. The guy was walking right into the trap, and even brought our hero to the place. The item he was selling could also be of interest to Shen, so they went together. But of course, they were suspicious of that place, saying it was strange. At that moment, someone appears clapping and welcomes the buyers. Pay attention. There are always two short girls next to a guy. It means he's the villain. Right away, he warns that they fell into a trap, and says the guys were naive, and the girls jump, moving like snakes, attacking our hero and his friend. The boy steps in front and ends up grabbing the two girls by the arm. If there's still time for talking, he lifts both and then throws the girls on the ground, breaking everything. They didn't even have time to have fun, and to humiliate those villains, he even wipes his hand. This trap was very weak, and he wondered if the old man had a new trick. The guy makes a hand seal, and a dark energy starts filling the whole room. Jinhu starts getting desperate, asking if our protagonist knows what is happening. We know the hero was a descendant of the dragon and could even see through that illusion. The enemy was trying to camouflage himself, but Shen caught the guy mid-path and prepared to deliver a powerful punch. Realizing he was doomed, the guy asks the boy to wait. If he wanted, he could give important information and explain what was going on. But the boy didn't want to hear anything. He just landed a punch on the old man's stomach, throwing him far away and breaking the walls. The impact was so powerful it broke the seal drawn on the wall. And finally, the guy fell to the ground. "I can escort you there," the boy asks if there were more enemies at the place. But there was a peculiar sound coming from afar, and his colleague says it came from that door. So they go there, and who he ends up finding is precisely his ex-wife, who had humiliated him for years. Comment below if you would help that worm. After removing the gag from her mouth, she starts begging for help. Our hero here was very kind, and begins to untie her while the girl swears she will do everything he asks. The only thing she wanted was to get out of that place quickly, and the big guy puts her over his shoulder to get her out of that smelly basement. Going outside, they sense an aura, and decide to go there. There was someone fallen leaning against a tree, and the man said he worked as security, but he was seriously injured, and our hero asks what happened. He was protecting Miss Susan, but she ended up being attacked, so he came to report everything. Some people broke into the mansion and took her away. Our hero gets worried, asking who did that. Then we see who was the guy who kidnapped Susan. This crazy man was worthless and began threatening her with that knife. He even mentioned she was very attractive, and he could take advantage a bit more before her companion showed up. She could be freed if she told where Shen was, and handed all her assets to him. But the girl here was tough, and said she wouldn't say anything. So the shameless man slaps her, and threatens her with that knife. Now that the family elder had moved, they were weaker and became irrelevant. After threatening her, he ends up throwing her to the floor, and locks her inside that room. She knew they were doing this only to lure Shen, because now he was the leader of the village. Meanwhile, our protagonist was desperately searching for her. Back at his mansion, many employees were there. All were tense, and they run to our hero asking for help. They said it was their fault because they couldn't stop the villain from entering the house. But our hero told them to calm down. A man dressed in black entered and took Miss Susan. Besides, Scarface got beaten and injured both arms. Since Scarface was strong, our hero concluded those bandits were powerful. He then ordered everyone to stay at the house and call an ambulance for Scarface, because he himself would take care of bringing Susan back. Thus, he began cultivation. He channeled all his energy to learn a new technique. He would need a seeking ability, and managed to unlock the forbidden technique to sense the energy of heaven and earth. That would be enough for him to search for Susan's energy, and thus know where she was. After a few seconds, he had learned the technique, and after biting his finger, he casts another spell, and begins chanting the seal's words. This was necessary to know exactly the place where she was, and his energy starts flowing through the whole area. Within a few minutes, he managed to find Susan's energy, and even reached the exact address. But this technique was very difficult to control, and he started feeling sick. The address was located on Cheongdong Mountain. Back at that place, the criminal kicks the door saying her time was up. She should speak where he was and hand over all her family's assets, but she trusted the boy would come to save her, and this made the criminal laugh at her face. But still, she fully trusted our hero. After laughing a lot, he said he would take advantage a bit before the boy arrived. And at that moment, our hero appears asking what the hell he was doing. The guy gets a huge scare, not noticing his presence. And there was our furious hero asking what the guy thought he was going to do. That place was very hidden, and he was surprised the hero had found it. And without giving him time to think, he already takes a punch to the stomach. And right after, our protagonist lands a punch on his back. The attack was so powerful that it broke the entire floor. And right after, he asked who had sent him, and the coward replies it was the Dai family. Yeah guys, it seems that old man really hasn't learned, and our hero will have to teach them a lesson. The coward keeps begging for forgiveness, and says he did it only for the money and that he hadn't hurt the girl. But Susan's face was bruised, and our hero asks if she hurt herself. That leaves the criminal speechless, and grabbing his neck, our hero says, people like him don't deserve forgiveness, and that they only repent after everything is screwed up. That way, our hero ends up breaking the guy into pieces, and throws him on the ground. Susan asks if the boy eliminated the criminal, but Shen says he didn't do that. He just made sure he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Then he hugs his beloved, saying it's all his fault because he couldn't protect her. The girl tries to calm him down, saying she's fine and nothing bad happened to her. And the boy still promises he won't let that happen again. She simply puts her hand on his head and thanks him, saying she believes in him. With blushing cheeks, he calls the girl to leave there quickly. Later, they return to the mansion. Scarface had his arms in casts and people were trying to hold him while he apologized. To everyone's happiness, our hero had arrived with the girl. She had some exams and was fine, only with some light injuries. Luckily for those villains, the girl wasn't seriously hurt. Otherwise, they would be even more screwed. Scarface goes there to apologize because he wasn't strong enough to protect the lady. Our hero tells him to get up, because it wasn't his fault. At that moment, Susan remembers two people had entered the place, and that already makes our hero even angrier, trying to find out who the other person was. Since they were hooded, it was impossible to see the face, but they wore a dark cloak. Scarface still says they had a kind of giant insect that caused paralysis. Hearing that, our hero starts to meditate on who it could be, and he concludes it was very likely the Xuanming sect. And that's how we reach the end of the Dragon Investor story. If you like this story, leave a comment down below so we can bring part 2. I will leave 2 videos as recommendations that I'm sure you will like because they are similar stories. But that's it. Thanks, and see you later, everyone.